Welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast, the Shoptalk edition. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
Joining us on this episode as our guest co-host is the one and only Neil Saunders, Managing Director and Retail Analyst at GlobalData Retail. Regular listeners will have heard his voice and benefited from his insights. As one of our analysts, many of you no doubt have seen his tremendously insightful and occasionally quite funny retail store commentary as he showcases his dry as the Vegas heat wit. Neil, welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I have to get the British sarcasm into my podcast.
Our guest on this episode is a pickup of a conversation Steve just had here live on the stage with Brett Taylor, co-founder and CEO of Sierra and the chairman of the board of OpenAI. Brett is an acclaimed software engineer and industry leader. Most recently, Brett was co-CEO of a small startup called Salesforce. Brett started his career at Google, where he created a little niche product called Google Maps. And later he joined Facebook, serving as its chief technology officer after it acquired his social networking startup, FriendFeed. First, the important retail news of the week, and after our interview with Brett, we'll be back with what is on Steve and Neil's radar screen and key takeaways from Shoptalk. Neil, tell the people about yourself. Who are you and what do you do for a living?
Yeah, so I'm Neil Saunders. For a living, if people follow me on LinkedIn, they probably think I walk into stores and criticize them.
They're not wrong.
They're not wrong. That's part of what I do. But I'm a retail analyst. So basically, I analyze all sorts of things to do with the retail sector, to do with consumers. I work for a firm called GlobalData, who does that more widely. And we basically help our clients navigate what's happening in the industry.
And in doing these store walks, is that an important part of your role? Like, you're really hands-on. So it's one thing to sit in an office and read reports, but you actually walk the store floor and just experience what their customers' experience is, right?
Yeah, it's really important because, we see a lot of things in the data, but you see on the shop floor what's happening. And then you talk to the associates, you talk to the customer. And actually what surprises me most is when you find out that some retail executives don't really walk the shop floor, and it's like, well, what are you doing? Because
or you imagine how could they be walking the shop floor because it's a disaster?
Because they would correct it, or maybe they tidy it up before they come. They get advance notice, perhaps. But yeah, it's a fun part of the job.
All right. Well, let's get into the news of the week, and we're going to start with the passing of a retail visionary, David Simon, who built Simon Property Group into the largest and most admired retail real estate company in the world. He was now what I consider a young 64, so he passed just last week. Mm-hmm. And Steve, you and I were going off mic and talking about this. We said, should we just dedicate the episode to him? But
right.
But your point was he's a very important role in the industry, and we should dedicate some serious time. So give me your thoughts of his legacy and what he's been able to accomplish.
Yeah, well, obviously it's a very sad story. His son Eli is actually taking over for him as the CEO, but he's been at mall-based retail for a very, very long time. And as you said, Simon Property, one of the real key firms in the industry. I think what I find most interesting about what he did and they did over a period of time was they really never let up on the idea. I don't call it remarkable retail, but if you develop a remarkable property, a remarkable mix, you can be successful. So as the narrative developed over time,
right,
that physical retail was going away, but in particular malls were dead. Well, if you look at their results, they have been incredibly impressive for quite a long time. But he understood that it's about picking the right places. Lots of malls are challenged, but for the most part, they have stayed and divested in malls that weren't going to work, invested in malls that were, and they've also been starting to innovate over a period of time to really change things, and the results are tremendous. So I think he's a guy that really pushed back against the narrative. A lot of people have found him to be a pretty tough guy to deal with, but I think his toughness and pushing, is part of what made it successful, because a lot of people were really not wanting to play along and didn't see the investment promise in some of the things. And I went back and saw, actually, Women's Wear Daily did a really nice write-up and had some choice quotes of his over the years, and a lot of them were basically, you guys don't know what you're talking, nicer than this, but in some cases not so much nicer. You guys don't know what you're talking about. This is what's going on, and this narrative that all malls are bad or that physical retail is dead is not true. So I think if you look at the results, they're there, and they're pretty well positioned, I think, for the future.
Neil, you've no doubt walked a few hallways in Simon Malls. Any thoughts on their legacy or his legacy building that empire? Good. I don't know if empire, building that...
Empire with a British guy, you can be a little careful.
Very careful with that.
What are your thoughts on the passing of this very, very important person in the retail community?
Yeah, it's very sad, and especially since he did have a lot of life ahead of him. But I also think the industry loses a very good spokesperson, because for those of us who believe in physical retail, he was someone who spoke up for physical retail, but he's also someone that showed it actually works, because malls are the bit that people often pick on at physical retail. It's like, oh, they're dying out, they're all closing, they're irrelevant. And really he showed that that isn't the case. If you take the time to invest, if you take the time to look at the tenant mix, if you negotiate hard with tenants to get the right players in, you can make a difference. And of course, that legacy shows in the portfolio that they've built up. But also, I think in some of the things they did, when retailers were challenged and found it difficult. I mean, Simon was one of the businesses as part of a conglomerate that bought some of those companies or invested in them.
Right.
And, people don't put their money...
I think of JCPenney, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They don't put their money in places where they don't think they'll get a return. And, I've spoken to JCPenney about that kind of partnership. And they said, one of the things that was interesting is that in that partnership with Simon, they had a company that really did believe in their future, and it made their lives easier because it gave them the breathing space to develop and to evolve. And I think that's really the legacy. It's the commitment to physical retail.
And just for the listeners, we are actually going to have Eric Sandy, co-president North American Real Estate for Simons, on the podcast in upcoming episodes. So no doubt we can ask him about the legacy and how and where and what way they're going to continue to build. So stay tuned for that. Let's talk about Saks. Steve, Saks Global actually reverses course.
Yeah.
On 3 store closings. That's something you said to me right off. I remember we were in NRF and it said, the likelihood is they're going to over-index. They're going to close more than they should. Turns out your guess was right.
Well, I don't know if it took a tremendous amount of insight. I think the bias in bankruptcy, having worked on a few, is that you get, I'm going to say get out of jail free card, but you have this opportunity to reorganize and get out of potential liabilities. And so to sell it to the creditors, a lot of times you have to basically say, look, just because management might believe that, hey, we can make this thing work, they're like, hey, we're not wanting to take that much more risk. We're just trying to get our cash out of this thing, and the court wants to approve something that seems workable. So I do think there is a bit of a bias towards that. I didn't anticipate this particular thing, and I'll make it quick because we talked about Saks Global a lot, and there's still a lot more to come on the reorganization. But yeah, the 3 of the stores, 2 are Saks Fifth Avenue, one in Sarasota, Florida, one in Palm Beach Gardens, and the other Neiman Marcus store in White Plains, New York, are going to stay open. Now, interestingly, and not coincidentally, we added this next, is that all 3 of these are Simon properties. And I do think there is something going on here where Simon is wanting to do what's right for their mall properties for the long term, and having vacant spaces where they're not in a position to replace them, at least not on this time frame, may give I don't know that these stores are going to be around forever, but it may be, let's work out a 3, 4, 5 year extension. And maybe they are getting some sort of subsidy or some cut that allowed Neiman Marcus to say, yeah, we can do this and be cash flow positive or something like that. And then maybe we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll figure out a way to do it. Maybe the mall gets redeveloped. We'll go to a smaller space, better space, different space. So anyway, I think we talked about this previously. I think there's several other stores that are on the chopping block that if something can be worked out, their lives may be extended. So anyway, they said they're not going to be any more reconsiderations in terms of being brought back into the portfolio. I was surprised that the White Plains store was going to close, because I think it's a pretty good store in a good area for Neiman's. But I think we still, have more to come on how this actually is going to settle out. But I think Simon is, getting back to the long-term perspective. They're proponents of physical retail, and they've got plans to redevelop a lot of these spaces. And I think this is giving them some time, some breathing room to do that.
Well, and we certainly have some experience in Canada with Hudson's Bay closing 90 stores, and the mall owners are like, that's a locked door to a parking lot, and it's a kind of a dead-end zone of the mall. So on the whole, we're better off having that open, even though we may not be hitting the same productivity. Neil, let's turn our minds to the NRF forecast for 2026. Steve and I shared on the last episode that whatever they're on, we'd like some of it, because they seem very chill about the whole thing. It's over-indexing to growth. What were your impressions of the forecast? Give us your thoughts.
I think the first word that comes to mind is toppy, which I know Steve likes that word. It's a sort of
Sounds very posh.
a British word. Toppy is the word. I mean, look, I like to be optimistic rather than pessimistic, but
Well, that's not going to fly on this show, my man.
No, I know I'm out of kilter, but to roll it back, to get back onto the more pessimistic note, I would like to know what the basis of the forecast is, because I think this is extraordinary growth. If it's produced, I mean, it is extraordinary, because there are not really any underlying dynamics that would suggest that we could have this level of uplift. I mean, the only thing that possibly could drive it is higher tax refunds, and that's a drop in the ocean over a particular period of time compared to the whole year. So I would also like something, whatever they're on, because it's certainly producing a very optimistic number. I mean, I think there'll be growth.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is behind driving that growth? I mean, if I look at typical levers of growth, it is more people moving into the middle class, or it is a dramatic reduction in taxes. Now, they said very clearly this forecast was done before the declaration of war, so they're not taking into account gas prices. So that's their gimme, or that's their mulligan, basically, on the forecast. But, that's a lot of growth. Isn't population not growing that much?
On top of a really good year, too. We were talking about that. Like, it's not as if you're comping against a weak year.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. What do you think?
I don't know, because the thing is, although the consumer's not in a terrible state, when you look at all the consumer data, people are still very concerned about high prices, especially the middle income and lower income consumers. There isn't a lot of disposable income that's sloshing around to be used on retail. You could make an argument that things could transfer away from services to retail, but the data don't really support that. It's not happening. You could say inflation's going to go up. Maybe it does go up by a lot with this gas price, but they didn't factor that in.
Mm-hmm. But you don't have a lot of housing starts, another key driver of retail.
The Home Depot is flagging. And what's most interesting is coming out of quarter four, all of the retailers have been very cautious. Mm-hmm. None of them are really talking about an acceleration. They're actually talking about a moderation.
Right.
So the NRF is going in completely the opposite direction to most of the industry. So I don't know what's driving it. I'd like to know more, but I think it's toppy. I don't think we will get to that level of growth.
Let's shift gears a little bit, literally and figuratively. Let's talk about the race to the doorstep. Steve, big announcements. Amazon rolls out a 1-hour and 3-hour delivery across hundreds of U.S. cities, 90,000 products with Prime discounted fees, plans to expand. We heard this morning here in the Berns Co. briefing, we heard FedEx announced they're doing something same day with some folks, One Rail. They called it same day for the rest of us kind of thing, if you didn't want to partner with Amazon or Walmart. So something's going on here.
Well, this was one of my predictions, that this was just going to be an escalating basis for competition. I'm not sure how many people need 1-hour, 3-hour, same-day delivery of things, but it has become almost a basic operating expectation, I think, because Amazon and Walmart have continued to ratchet up the amount of products that are available quickly. We talked about previously, Neil and I learned more about this when we were at Amazon Grocery Analyst Day, about the expansion of fresh items and expansion to rural communities. And so they just keep pushing, Amazon being they on this, Walmart doing the same thing. We've seen some announcements recently from Target as well. So I don't know if this is a race to the bottom. It's obviously very expensive, and it takes a lot of technology and capital investment to make it happen. I just more wonder, if you're not one of the 2, 3, 4 companies that are able to do this, how do you respond? Because it's a money-losing proposition, or just even an impossibility for many companies to do this. And if this becomes kind of the standard, what do you do to respond to it? Or you just kind of chase your tail because you will have a terrible cost position. So I don't know, Neil.
Neil, I have heard, when I talk to retailers, that they're using the DoorDash or the Ubers or the whoever, and lots of different formats are picking up on this. I'll pick it up in the store, and it's kind of outsourcing it all. Do you see that as a competitive match to this? Let's get the stuff from the store shelf to the doorstep in 1 hour for the rest of us.
Yeah, I think it is. I think what Amazon looks at is the competitive landscape. They see this fast, very rapid delivery segment growing. It's small, but it is growing. And I think their point of view is like, look, if this is going to mature into something bigger, we have to have a stake in this game because they want to be the place for commerce. So whether you want to buy a luxury product from Amazon and you're happy to wait for it, or you want to buy a carton of milk or a personal care product and you need it immediately, Amazon is the place that you go. So I think for them, it's all about staying in all different parts of commerce so that the customer comes to them first. That said, I agree with Steve. I think the interesting thing is Amazon can do this. The infrastructure's there to support it. And of course, they are charging. Even Prime members will have to pay for this super fast delivery. They have to pay something. So I think Amazon has the economies of scale. Walmart also can do it because Walmart has the store network to deliver it. And they have the logistics network. But who else can really do it?
What do you think the core customer need that's driving this? I mean, it's one thing to offer it. I mean, there's some people, well, if I can get it in 1 hour, I might as well. I've heard retailers tell me that there's people who say, listen, if I'll pay a premium because then I stick to my budget. I don't pick up impulse items. And so I've heard, privacy. I've heard all kinds of different explanations. But any thoughts on that?
I think a lot of it is genuinely driven by necessity. In two dimensions. So I think there's the actual necessity. I need a pint of milk. I need this and I need it now. But I think the other necessity is often just the simplicity of it. So, you want to order something, but you're going out that afternoon. So you just love the certainty that it's going to get there in that space of time. Right. You don't need to keep thinking about it. Now, not everyone is going to pay a premium for that, but some people do. It's just get it off the list, cross it off.
One less thing to worry about,
exactly.
kind of.
Yeah.
The other thing I would mention, which I think is also incredibly advantageous to Walmart and Amazon, is, they make so much money in advertising. So the more they drive this incremental, so it's one thing to say, oh, this is expensive from a supply chain standpoint, but if it's another item, it's another trip, that is an opportunity to advertise, which is a 75% gross margin business as opposed to 20, I don't know, whatever the gross margins are at Walmart. So I think it's just a different thing. So again, if you're another competitor, aside from just you don't have the infrastructure to do it, or you have to have a high variable cost thing like Instacart, you don't have the offset or not nearly the offset to that to kind of subsidize this or even have it be truly incremental to your EBITDA.
And I think the other interesting thing is doing this across all of these different products, which obviously are essentials and non-essentials, and they know what people quickly, they have the data on that. But building out the infrastructure now by doing this, I think gives them an unlock further down the road in grocery, because this is where their attention is. And grocery is the one area where people like either timed delivery or fast delivery. So if they build this network out for non-food and it starts to get the scale, as they roll out more food, which they are doing, perishable goods, that is very useful. It gives them a backbone that they can use.
Well, all right. Well, that's a wrap on the news. Well, let's get to our conversation, or Steve's conversation with Brett Taylor, and then we'll be back with takeaways from Shoptalk, and then what is on the radar screen for you two fellas. So stay tuned. All right, we are back. Let's talk about Shoptalk. So it's their 10th anniversary. It's a new layout in the floor. I kind of like the layout, everything being in one place. We're here in the Berns Co area doing the podcast. So Neil, what are your key takeaways from the sessions?
Yeah, so I love the mix of looking at AI but still having the focus on the customer. And I think one of the things that's come through is much more realism about AI. I think when a couple of years ago, last year, there was a lot of hype. I think now we're starting to see people saying, look, it's important, we're looking at it, but it's only one piece of the pie. And in one of the main stage sessions, Home Depot was saying, look, 10, 20 years ago, people were saying, well, a store's going to be relevant from online. Now, we know they still are, but online is relevant too. And they use the same argument for AI. Look, things like agentic commerce, it will be another channel. It's going to become bigger, but it's not going to necessarily replace these other things. You've got to juggle things. And I like that realism coming through. I think it's the right direction.
Right. Steve, you've been to this and many others. So you've been walking around. What did you see? Anything on the show floor catch your eye, or anything you heard?
No, but I didn't try very hard to do that. So full disclosure. I guess my big takeaway, and this is, I'm not sure it's even really a takeaway, it's really an observation, which is there's so many different vendors chasing a very similar set of things. And I had a conversation with someone who's way more knowledgeable about that, who basically said there will be consolidation probably pretty quickly. And so one of the things we were talking about is, okay, well, as a retailer, how do you choose which vendors to partner with if you've got this fear that perhaps they may not be there for the long term? Now, this guy was talking his own book because he happens to be one of the bigger players, so it was a bit of perhaps a self-serving comment, but I think it makes sense. I mean, I do know from talking to some retailers, they get almost paralyzed by choice and the fear of making the wrong choice among the available set, but also because things are moving so quickly. Well, how do I know that this version of agentic or this version of Gen AI isn't going to be somehow, there won't be this leapfrogging by something new? So it's impressive just how much, and I absolutely agree with it feels much more real, but at the same time, just the sheer choice and how do you stay on top of it and know when to go beyond just a bunch of small scale experiments to actually really getting committed to a certain path. I don't know. It's above my pay grade in terms of really being able to process that.
Well, speaking of fear of missing out, if anybody didn't make it to Shoptalk and they were like, how did this retail rumble go? You're not going to have to guess because we did record the retail rumble, both of you gentlemen and myself and a bunch of other luminaries in the retail industry were debating key topics. And then we're going to test the audio to see who actually won because we're going to hear the clapping and we're going to see how that goes. So listeners, stay tuned. We recorded that. It was a pile of fun, and I thought everybody made some great comments and great insights.
Almost everybody. I mean, to be fair, the guy I argued with. It's a little weak, but...
All right, well, you'll be able to judge for yourselves, people. Maybe we'll put some kind of voting mechanism on the podcast so people can vote. All right, let's get towards the end. What's on our radar screen for the weeks ahead? Neil, kick us off. What are you looking at in the next couple of weeks and thinking about?
Yeah, so one of the things I'm looking out for is the retail sales data, what tax refunds are doing, because they're supposed to be running quite a bit higher than they were last year. And obviously, it's not only interesting to see whether that's having an effect on retail sales, but whether it's having an effect on certain sectors, because traditionally what's happened is with refunds, people have gone and bought big ticket things, furniture, televisions, because it's that treat and that indulgence. Last year, that kind of broke down a little bit. People were using it for more sensible things, paying off debts, not very interesting for retail, but important for consumers, smaller indulgences. So I'm really interested to see where that goes, because I think that could be a really nice boost to retail, or it could be a damp squib. We've got to really see where the consumer's mindset is in terms of spending. And of course, the problem is it's not only that the consumer's already under pressure, but now they're seeing higher gas prices, they've got more doubts about the future. So does that make them be a bit more sensible and save them money? I think that remains to be seen.
Steve, are you able to match the damp squid idea of what's on your radar screen?
I saw Damp Squid open for U2 back in the day. They were excellent. I don't know.
They're my favorite grunge band from Seattle, actually.
Really? Whatever happened to that? I don't know. I don't think so. This is why we're not having Neil on again, because it's very difficult to compete with. No, I mean, I touched, my thing is something I touched on, I think, last week or the week before, which is what's going on with inflation and interest rates. Some of the recent data, really even before all the war implications, suggest that inflation is kind of ticking up again. And if you look at the interest rate scenarios, interest rates have continued to be going up when we expected they would be going down. And I think that's also another important factor. If people get priced out of the, even aside from some of the things Neil talked about, if people are just getting priced out of the market, that has a big impact on retail. And if inflation continues to the extent people are financing cars, appliances, obviously home purchases in general, all of this is a real headwind. And, a lot of that certainly has to do with what's going on with the war. But a lot of people are starting to think, there's a more structural thing that is changing here. And even if hostilities died down, we may be, this may be the kind of stagflationary environment. That's another term I think we're going to start hearing a little bit more about, the stagflation worries.
All right, well, fair enough. That's a wrap on this show. Neil, thanks so much for joining us and being our very special co-host. Now, if people want to get in touch with you, learn about the work you do, maybe do a keynote or two, where do they get in touch and how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. So you can follow me on LinkedIn or you can email me. It's just neil.saunders@globaldata.com.
Like I said, that's a wrap on the show. Congratulations again to Shoptalk to make it 10 years, and we wish them many more.